I am a long hauler, and sometimes this is called long COVID. And essentially, it's when people get over the virus in terms of not shedding it anymore, they test negative, et cetera, but they continue to have lingering symptoms. And I'm not sure what just to be honest with you, the exact number is of days which qualify as a long hauler. I know that the percentages of roughly of what people have so long afterwards, but essentially it's any extended period. Originally, the disease was considered to be like a 2-week disease roughly. And now they know after 3 months, 80% of people at least have some symptom left. And then there are people like me who are even much further down the road and have several symptoms left. And a lot of this is due to they found out over time that the virus isn't just a respiratory virus, but in fact attacks different organs and different other parts of the body. And unfortunately, that's what I'm going through.
We were talking about percentages. So I was reading on the Atlanta Journal-Constitution's article about you that right now the estimates are that long haul syndrome is affecting about 10% of people. And I'm thinking about where my family lives in Gwinnett, and in their particular town, that would be 3,000 people. So it's interesting to.
Yeah, well, that is really one of the things that really kind of inspired me to get the media involved. Really was just the fact that I think this is the untold story that all doctors, and I've seen this in several different places being talked about. This is going to be the fight after the pandemic, because 10% is actually on the low end, right? I've seen 15, 20. I just read, I think today, 1 out of 7 approximately. So that scales. They said estimated it was this was maybe from a January article, it was 2 million people plus in the United States already being long haulers just based off that percentage, right? And worldwide over 5 million, something like that. So yeah, what people don't understand is like this scales very high. And I don't want to be too dramatic, but this is something I have to deal with daily, is like, they don't know the end game for being a long hauler, right? So not only may we suffer, and maybe we'll suffer for 2 years, a year. I'm a year in right now, or maybe it'll be 20 years, or maybe it'll lead to taking years off your life. And that fear of the unknown is real, very real.
Certainly. So going to your initial experience with this, when did you first realize that something was just not right?
Well, in February of last year, it was into February, early March. Because I didn't know I was so sick, it kind of blurs together. But definitely in February, I had a cough. And I don't usually get a cough. And I didn't know anything about COVID, but I remember distinctly sitting around with my brother and my sister-in-law playing Marvel, Nintendo Ultimate Alliance video games. And I said, man, guys, I feel okay, but I have had a cough I just cannot get rid of. And it was probably about a week later than that, I woke up in bed and felt like I had a heart attack. I was already awake, excuse me. And then it was just like, bam, 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 bam. My heart started beating out of its chest. And it's not the same thing. It didn't just increase. It was thumping like it was going to break out. And I just popped out of bed. And then, like most guys and young, healthy people, I just ignored it and went on with my life. And then a week later, my twin brother, who I was living with, said, hey, I almost went to the emergency room last night with my wife. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, I couldn't breathe. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, I just can't take a deep breath. And this kind of spiraled into, eventually around this time, we started to hear about COVID kind of hit right at the beginning of March there. We started to hear about it. And he told me that was one of the symptoms about breathing. And I'll be honest with you, I kind of was like, man, you don't have COVID. I've had a cough. It's just regular old sickness. But we couldn't get a test. There were so few of them back then. And my brother, actually, he went to urgent care first. And they said, no, we're not going to give anybody a test who doesn't have a fever. Neither of us had a fever. So it wasn't until maybe a month or 6 weeks after symptoms, at least, until my PCP could eventually get me a test. And, even then he had to be like, you have shortness of breath, right? Like he had to coach me through. I can't remember if I had to say I had a fever or not. I didn't, but I eventually went in, but it was negative because it was so far down the road. And again, I think this is important too for people to hear, because the symptoms are so various. So we both got diagnosed with bronchitis, which is like, as a non-diagnosis. They didn't see any of that. So we were on antibiotics and we weren't getting better. And my shortness of breath, and eventually I started getting chest pains, and I called a teledoc on Easter. And she told me to watch a Disney movie and take an antihistamine. So I trust doctors, so I did, right? obviously it didn't go away. And another couple of weeks went by, and I called my PCP when they were finally letting people go into the doctor again. Because I don't know if you remember, but for a while they were only like testing you in the parking lot up your nose, and they wouldn't let anybody in. So when they finally let me in, I said, "Can you just check out my heart?" And he ran an EKG, and my heart was so messed up they rushed me to the hospital, and I failed my stress test, and a litany of things happened after that. But the real takeaway is, even when I was in the hospital at this time, they didn't make the connection to COVID. It wasn't until my brother got hospitalized the very next week as he started to pass out and all that stuff, and then our guts and our nervous system started to fall apart, and a different doctor who my brother was seeing all along had thought we had COVID. And after long hauler started to become a big group online, we started seeing all the symptoms we were having. Like, oh man, people are having heart palpitation. Then articles are coming out like people are dying of heart attacks from this, right? And then all the it's attacking the nervous system, and the gap started to fill in. So then our cardiologists, our neurologists, and our doctors kind of became on board, and we're like, yeah, I mean, it's the chances of you guys genetically falling apart in this way at the exact same moment in time as the pandemic are too low. It's just got to be COVID. So that's kind of the reasoning that led us to where we are.
Wow. Wow.
And again, shortness of breath. And like I said, in hindsight, it's so easy. It's like, yeah, you couldn't breathe, you were coughing all over the place. But at the time, they were so convinced that a fever, this is even before they knew about the smell and taste thing, right? This was just like fever and cough time. So.
Wow. So, and that's something that I've talked to microbiologist Dr. Amber Schmidtka about, was the transformation of the disease. It initially starts as respiratory, and then it becomes vascular. So it's getting into your veins, getting into those other systems. So that lines up.
That I just got tested for blood clots in the blood vessels in my legs Tuesday, and I'm actually still waiting for results from that. I wish I could give them to you. I wouldn't mind sharing it, but yes, because the woman checking for my thrombosis in my legs, she said the amount of people they've seen since COVID has shot through the roof, and that she had a 32-year-old long hauler in not long before me. And the same thing, his parents were fine. It's just so hard to tell who it's going to be. And he was just devastated because he just he just wasn't recovered. And I feel that.
Yeah, I mean, this must have some kind of impact on just activities that you're able to do and sustain, right?
Oh, for sure. I mean, there's the physical things. So empirically, the things that are wrong with me so far, again, is that my heart's arrhythmic, my cholesterol, I don't know if this is COVID or not, let me make that clear, but has become, and I'm a very skinny, healthy dude, it's become like world record breaking high. I have hives and rashes and all this kind of stuff. So there's a lot of discomfort, but yeah, the other thing is, what really is terrible is just eating. I've lost so much weight because with the gut and this like kind of acid refluxy type things, there's very few things that I can eat that just don't feel like they're poisoning my body. Because I was like nauseous for months and having a lot of GERD-like symptoms. And again, at the time, very early on, we didn't know that the gut was being attacked, and some kidneys and liver and things like that were being attacked by this. So I thought, maybe I just had some really extreme acid reflux, and I didn't know what was going on, right? That was the thing. But yeah, it's made I mean, the mundane things in life, like eating, right? Like getting up the stairs at times and things like that. I had such bad muscle weakness. I have a clear memory of trying to do laundry, and I couldn't get a full detergent container down because my arms just couldn't hold it anymore. And I was a guy who was in the gym regularly, right? So the weakness and those kinds of things are very real, very tough.
So then it's clearly you can see what's going on with you at this point now, and you can clearly feel all these things that are happening. What was reception like just in your community? Like when people find out that you are a long hauler, how does that usually received?
Well, thank God, I think attitudes are changing. But I got to tell you, early on, I was very gaslit from everybody, from even my first doctor, right, who eventually put me in the hospital, to one of the first coworkers I talked to, good guy, very close friend, sent me numbers from the CDC and was basically just questioning whether or not the virus is even real. So, even telling someone I was close to, like, I'm very sick, man, I got this thing, this is what's going on. They were sending me numbers and saying things like, it just doesn't seem to add up. Why does nobody have the flu? These kinds of things. So early on, it was I was so sick, and I have pretty good perspective. So I didn't feel hate towards those people or anything like that, but I felt an immense sadness because to be suffering like I am and still see people not wearing masks and belittling it and making up conspiracy theories and things like that was rough. And again, I do think since coming back to work and things like that, and people saw how I looked, right? You know, I think that was a big shock for people. I was so skinny and frail and things like that. Maybe it created some empathy, but I can tell you based off of experiences at work that there are still plenty of people who just don't believe this thing's real. And I find that part hard. And again, I can even remember somebody I work with asking me like two things I can remember, and these are good people. I want to point that out, but their information is different than the information you and I have. And they said things to me like, have you tried going outside? Which is not bad advice, but implicitly what I felt there was like, maybe you're just depressed or something like that. And then somebody else told me, well, I had it and I just had a sore throat. And I don't know, I don't want to put any implications into that comment that aren't there, right? But the feeling is like, how could this happen to you but not happen to me? And again, that's why I'm glad you talked to a biologist, because it does affect different people very differently. And I'm happy that the people who have gotten the light into this, I don't want anybody sharing this, but you should know that it's very difficult to tell who's going to hurt adversely. It's not as simple as like, oh, you're old, or oh, you're obese, or oh, you have diabetes.
Right.
I didn't have any of that stuff.
That's so important to just get that information out there, that it does seem right now we don't seem to have enough information to predict who's going to be hit in what way. We're still, all our data is still evolving. Our data collection methods are still evolving.
There's certainly correlations with age and comorbidities and things like that. So I'm not trying to demean that, but what I am saying is there are people with no known history of any kind of ailment, right? Healthy people and young people. I just read today that the average age of an ICU patient from, I think it was in July, which was the deadly months we had, was 37. That does not fit the narrative. That does not fit the narrative that everybody's hearing. The average ICU patient age then was 37.
Yeah. And that brings me to the question. I know that you've been teaching in person since relatively early in the school year. You got to wonder, how much are you spending to protect yourself with PPE and related gear in the classroom?
So I actually came back in November, just a week before Thanksgiving break, and I have spent, I can do the math very fast, I have 3 0.1 micron air purifiers, because allegedly I'd read somewhere that the virus is about 0.125. So they're maybe a couple $100 each, approximately. So that's about $600. The helmet I wear, it's a respirator that goes down to 0.3 microns on my head, was $500. So we're already over $1,000 there. And then I've also I have at least 4 fans hooked up around my desk, blowing things away. And they're probably, I don't know, average about $20 each or something like that. So, you're getting close to, that $1,200 range just off that kind of stuff. The other things I've built to kind of barricade around my room, I literally just found. But I mean, also, there's I wear KN95s every day, right? Like I don't trust they give you like a couple of surgical masks on it, good luck, right? And again, given the evolution of the virus now, things like that, I'm even thinking about buying N95, which are incredibly difficult to get. But I buy KN95s and I wear those in a cloth mask every day. And again, that's expensive. And it's not like we've gotten a bump in pay to get those kinds of things, right? So and I would say on behalf of the students, I have to notice that recently with everything they're talking about in the CDC and double masking and fit of the mask, a lot of times when I'm telling kids to pull their mask up in class, their mask is clearly so worn out that it doesn't have tension, which is, again, at this point, it really is a farce. Like they're following the rules, but they're protecting no one, right? It's accidentally what they call a chin diaper, whether they meant for it to be or not. And I think this is kind of overlooked, honestly. I do think that it's been made clear recently in the news that not only double masking could be more effective, but really a very secure mask, which I think is not always the case in the classroom.
I have noticed that they've been coming out with masks that allow you to adjust. I've also heard that you can just tie those elastic bands together, but the age of the masks does have an effect on, how effective they are. It
does, and I'm particularly talking about students who appear to be wearing one of the surgical masks that I'm speculating that it's old simply because it's not tightly down. It's literally like sagging down. Do you know what I mean by
Yeah.
that? So I'm speculating. I don't think they're trying to break the rules or they put it down so their nose can
Yeah.
breathe. They'll have it just, but maybe they just have a little head and it's the wrong size. Could be. I'm not sure. But
Right.
either way, a lot of times I see kids trying to be good and listen to my instructions, and the mask is just falling and falling.
Yeah. They're doing their best, but this is bigger than them.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So then I guess I've got two final questions for you.
Sure.
So what would you say to a parent whose district is looking at going back to face, a parent who's just they're struggling, maybe they work multiple jobs, maybe there's not another partner in the picture at the moment, or that person has been sick, and they're just trying to get through virtual learning, but it's not working. What would you say to them about going F to F right now?
What would I say to them about what? I'm sorry. One more time.
That's fine. What would you say to them about going back in the building, about sending their child in the building at this time?
Well, this is a obviously touchy subject. You can tell the country's a bit torn about it, and but I think you still have to do two things really: A, follow the science, and B, consider the stakes. And of course, the stakes are the same for everybody, but the risks are different for everybody. But so let's start with follow the science. If you look at the CDC and what Anthony Fauci said as far back as August, even the most recent studies say that it is imperative that community spread is low. Now, originally, Anthony Fauci had it as like green zones were under 5%. Anything 5 to 10 was a yellow zone, and over that was orange or red or something like that, and it was don't go to school, right? Most communities, unfortunately, one I teach in has been way over that for now. I think that's worth considering. I mean, again, CDC, all the headlines have said school's safe to open but if you read the articles and the studies, it's very clear that in the places where they did these studies, restaurants and bars were shut down. And also, this is the next thing: is the school keeping kids in cohorts? And if you don't know what a cohort is, it means the kids report to the same classroom every day. They eat lunch in that classroom, so they're not changing classes with different bell schedules, according to the CDC. So that could leave your child, and by extension, you, safer. Because I think that's the real thing to take away here is the CDC said the spread wasn't significantly higher than the community and sometimes even lower, right, according to these. But whether or not that's generalizable to your school and your household depends. Is the community spread low? Are they doing cohorts? Are they requiring masks? Right? If all three of those things are true, they say things are in pretty good shape and they're contact open. It's just not common right now for those things to be true. And I would say this, as one of the 10%, 15%, 20% of people who may never have a normal life again, it's very important to recognize an existential crisis versus an actual life or death crisis. So I'm a teacher. I care about kids who are coming from rough situations, whether it be socioeconomic or anything like that. We understand. We've been making this fight for a long time, but it is important to recognize I've never held a kid responsible to the same level who was having troubles at home. I never expected a kid who couldn't eat to care about theme as much as a kid who's coming from a safe home and an actualized home. And it's the same with teachers and parents. So speaking to parents out there, you certainly, I had to go on FMLA because I was so sick and lose, well over $10,000 of my salary and things like that. And I couldn't get out of bed. Who does that help, right? Maybe virtual learning is difficult, but you have to start considering what are the stakes? What are the likelihoods for you? Do you have pre-existing conditions? How old are you, right? And really, are those scientific guidelines being met? Because if they're not, I'll inflect my own opinion on it here, is that, the stakes are very high, and it's a lot. It is a lot to risk. It really is, if those conditions aren't met.
Then the final question for you is, what would you say to college students who are interested in beginning an education program right now?
So this is a tough question, but I'm going to choose to take the optimistic side of it for sure. just anecdotally, I'll throw this out there. You know, when I was at my sickest during this, and I don't want to make it too much about me, but I think this is important about understanding the career. First off, you start to reflect on a lot of things like that. You know, and we're all going to have to work and we're all going to have to do jobs. So how much do you care and love your job matters. And as a teacher, I love mine. So I'm going to speak from that perspective. And the pandemic may have changed that in the micro because it's so hard, as it's changed a lot of things for a lot of people. But I still think if this is a student's calling, if they want to help people and they're interested in education, they should do it. I mean, as I reflected on how I've spent the last 8 years of my life, which is how long I've been teaching, I thought, I'm so glad. And even though I might have caught this at school, I'm so glad that I did what I've done. You know, I love teaching. You get to make a difference. I get to learn from kids every day. I get to be around motivated people. I mean, how many people get to go to a job every day where they're almost guaranteed to continue to grow intellectually, not just as a person, which is going to happen too because you're around such great people and great children.
Absolutely.
But it's hard to ignore that. And I don't think this is forever. You know, I have hope. Recently, a lot of students, I mean, it's really moved me to tears, and I feel not worthy of have come out to help me through this. And that's what it's all about. I mean, there is nothing more rewarding. You know, I don't think teachers should be in the situation where they should be choosing between life or death. So I'm not saying no matter what, but I do think this is temporary. It's going to be okay. And if you feel a passion or a calling to come do this, you should come do it because there is no more rewarding way to spend your life. There really isn't.
I feel the same way. That's really beautiful. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about this.
It's no problem.
I wish you all the best.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.